Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. I want to begin by thanking Muslim Association in Canada, MAC, for their amazing leadership. And I'm in awe of the slogan they chose, you all chose for this conference, seizing the moment. And I'm in love with the ayah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِن تَنْصُرُوا اللَّهَ يَنْصُرْكُمْ وَيُثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَكُمْ. Oh, you believe, if you bring victory to Allah, Allah will bring victory to you. And He will stabilize your steps. Allah will bring you hope. I want to, in the next 15 minutes, talk about three things: past, present, and future. I want you to go back and think about the moment, an important moment and turning point in Islamic history. The year is 1258, when the Mongols come and destroy the center of the Islamic world, Baghdad, the greatest capital Islam has ever seen. And that destruction by the Mongols of the heart of the Muslim world in the 7th century of Islam, 13th century of the Common Era was so complete, so total, that people thought there was no way back from it. In fact, people after that thought that this is the end of time. The sun of Islam has set and there is no way for it to come back up. And an entire genre of literature on the end times emerged at that time. Many people began to talk about the Day of Judgment is coming next. The Ya'juj and Ma'juj have come, and now there is nothing but to wait for the Day of Judgment. There's no point in living anymore. And yet, at the same time, there were some of the greatest scholars of Islam, including Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah or Ibn al-Qayyim or Ash-Shatibi or Ibn Khaldun, and I can go on, came from that period, who wrote some of the greatest works in Islam after that moment. But it was a time when the Muslim Ummah was sandwiched between the Crusaders from the west and the Mongols from the east. And it seemed like the time is up. Now, fast forward 200 years, only 200 years after that, the year is 1453. What happened in the year 1453? Anybody remind me? That was the fatah of the opening of Constantinople, the city that is now Istanbul. And this was a city that Muslims have been trying to conquer since the Prophet's prophecy, alayhi salatu wasalam, for 7 centuries. And that city was not conquered until after 2 centuries of this moment when we thought it was all over. We, as in the Ummah, thought this is over, and yet an American historian, Marshall Hodgson, writes in his book, The Venture of Islam, that if an alien came to the earth in the year 1500 and looked at the world, he would have concluded that the world is going to be Muslim within a century. The entire world will be Muslim. Nobody can stop them. It is the Ottomans in the west, the Mughals in the east, and Islam is spreading. And the Ottomans remained a great force, terror of Europe, for nearly 4 centuries after that, before they began to decline. My point is that there was a time when people thought it was over. The Day of Judgment is near and there is no point in making an effort. And yet, there were some who turned it around, and there came one of the greatest revivals of Islam. And historians say that if you look at the expansion of Islam, one of the greatest waves, there were three great waves in the past, one right at the beginning, and then the second great wave, or one of the great waves was right after the Mongols conquered, Islam began to spread to new regions. So now let me talk about a little bit about the present. In the last 100 years, on the one hand, we have seen some of the greatest setbacks in Islamic history. But I don't want to leave with a negative note, and there is so much to celebrate also. In 1910, there was a census done according to which the number of Muslims in the world was 200 million. Today, it's 2 billion. So the number of Muslims in the world is 10x. It's 10 times what it was. Whereas the number of people in the world has been quadrupled 4 times. So Muslims now are 10 times what we were 100 years ago in number, and in proportion to the world population, we have gone from about 10% to 25% and counting. This is, excluding the first half century of Islam, this is the greatest expansion of the number of Muslims in the world that in 14 centuries of Islam. How has that happened? Because Muslims did not give up. We continued to pass the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even when the Khilafah was taken away. Many setbacks came after 1924 with the abolition of the Khilafah in 1924. And I don't want to undermine them at all. In some ways, we are living in the most fragile times for the Ummah. There has never been a time like this where the first Qibla of Muslims and the third holiest mosque has been endangered for so long. Or has there been? In fact, let me make another reference to the past. When in 1099 of Common Era, the Crusaders arrived into the Muslim world and conquered Jerusalem, killed Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and they boasted that the hooves of their horses were covered in blood. That's how much blood they spilt of Muslims and Christians and Jews in the Holy Land. And then, how does the story go? There came Salahuddin and he conquered all, right? Wrong. In fact, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi rahimahullah was the end of a long process. It took 88 years from 1099 to 1187 for Muslims to take back Jerusalem and open it for all people in peace once again. 88 years. What was happening in those 88 years? The real heroes of those 88 years were many. And Salahuddin was, if you will, an icing on the cake. They were the ulama. They were the common people who were going back to their deen. There was Nuruddin al-Zangi. And then there was, before there could be victory, there was unification of Egypt and Syria. And so we have been here before. And so to think as Muslims about our future, we have to understand our past, and we have to have the courage to dream about the future. And I want to say a little bit about dreaming today. We're living in times, in the last 20, 25 years, I've taught American Muslim leaders, university students, and I've seen that after 9/11, 2001, There was a worldwide campaign that was ostensibly against terror, but it turned against Islam. In many of the places, the global war on terror often became global war on Islam. Let's be honest about it. And yet, it took a toll on us. The Muslim youth, young men and women, were terrified to think. There was a time, and I taught for several years, 2007, 8, 9, 10, and so on, when I could see the results of that propaganda and that constant lying and constant attack on us. We were terrified to think what Islam was. In fact, people thought Islam was the problem that needed to be solved. Our hope, we stopped dreaming, we stopped hoping. And if you stop dreaming, you live in a nightmare. Now that has changed, alhamdulillah. It has changed over time, and we have seen great evidence of that, including another wave of amazing, brave Americans who are coming into Islam, and you're going to talk to, inshallah, and hear one of them, Brother Sean King, today. And he's part of this brilliant, luminous wave of Muslims. So I want to end with a call to dream and an insistence that we use our deen, our religion, our tradition, and our vocabulary to think about those dreams. Let's not be shy of using our deen. You see, if the people of moderation and understanding and religion, if we do not talk about the Khilafah, then the extremists will. If there is not a good one, there will be many bad ones. We have to say, yes, it is part of our tradition by the consensus, ijma', it is an obligation on Muslims to be unified. And what does Khilafah mean? It was the realm where the Jews, when they were persecuted in Europe for 1,500 years, that's where they escaped to. In the Reconquista movement in 1492, after the Inquisition, the Ottoman Sultan sends a ship where Muslims and Jews go back, and today go back and they're taken to Istanbul. And if you go to Istanbul today, there is a neighborhood called Balat. Then the Balat neighborhood is where the Jews settled and lived for 500 years. That is what the Khilafah was. In a recent work done by a colleague of mine, a non-Muslim colleague, Jonathan Lawrence at Boston University, he talks about how the Muslims in the modern world were more tolerant and most open to empirical ideas in the world, most modern. Toward the end of the 19th century under the Ottoman Empire. And as soon as Muslims became divided, insecure, attacked, that is when many of us became more conservative and more reactionary and more sectarian against each other. So the caliphate was a model in which Muslims could live with differences and non-Muslims could feel secure. In fact, I have said this to my Christian friends and colleagues in the academy, that if what you care about is living by how Jesus lived, by the true teachings of your deen, of your religion, then is it better for you to live in this capitalist, materialist society where you have lost the essence of your religion, where the teachings of Bible are mocked, where most Christians do not live by it, or the place where Christians lived under Muslims for more than a millennium and thrived. If they wanted to live by their deen, Islam, the lands of Islam were the place, both for Jews and Christians. And they don't have very good response to that. They have to admit that that would be a better setup for them than the secular, capitalist, consumerist, materialist society today. All that to say that we have a lot of challenges. This is not a walk in the park to think of rebuilding a civilization. But stop thinking that Islam is the problem and start thinking, remember that Islam is the solution. Islam is the solution that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent. And finally, with our people in Gaza, what they have reminded the world is that we carry in our hearts that wealth of trust in Allah, that generosity toward the world, that forgiveness, that courage that the world wants and the world needs. People are coming to Islam today in droves or reading the Quran, not because somebody has provided them theological arguments, but because they have seen Islam in practice and they're looking in the Quran for what it is. And so let me end with this hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam: al-mu'minu mir'atu al-akhihi al-mu'min. That a believer is like a mirror to his believing brother. Meaning that every believer has the same wealth, same treasure of La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah in his heart. What the people in Gaza have, you have. What the courage that they have shown, you have it. Al-mu'minu mir'atu akhihi al-mu'min. So when you see their errors, their faults, correct yourself. And when you see their strengths, know that you have the same. So with that, I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings victory, brings tawfiq to this ummah once again. We see the signs and we see the victory from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. والسلام عليكم.